The key to surviving in the wilderness is picking the right tools. Check out this guy catching fish with a net. He just tosses it in and pulls out a fish, easy as pie. With the right skills, you can catch fish with just a line and hook, and these fish are huge. The best ingredients often need the simplest cooking, no seasoning required for natural flavor. What tools would you bring for wilderness survival? In the last challenge, contestants walked 5 miles, faced an elimination round, and were divided into groups. Tools are chosen based on ranking, and Brent had to be carried home by the crew due to severe dehydration. I wonder how they'll perform after the regrouping? On day 15 of the challenge, Dank is not happy with his group. He never got along well with Tracy, and Jeff is an old rival who always disrupts his rhythm. Dank just wants to find a place to rest quickly. After searching for a while, he finally finds a relatively flat spot. Jeff thinks this is the toughest season he's ever participated in. How can they have an elimination round right after a migration, and then immediately have to find a place to build a shelter? The worst part is there's no shade here, so they have to keep walking to find a better spot. Over in Frando's group, things are more harmonious, but the downside is that Danny has no gear, putting them at a slight disadvantage. However, everyone is cooperating well, so he thinks teamwork won't be an issue. Keith's group is focused on eating fish, and the area looks like rhino territory. It's best to find a place with trees, so even if a rhino comes, they can climb up. Rhinos are easily attracted to campfires and like to put them out. Their thick skin and tough hide can't be stopped by thorn bushes. The surrounding red cliffs are a favorite spot for leopards. Contestants are building shelters near the pond, where food resources are abundant. The main challenge is avoiding dangerous animals, especially rhinos, which are aggressive even against hunting rifles. Dank's group finally reaches their destination. The crew picked a pretty good spot. Jeff is already eyeing the pond for fishing. It's the first time he's seen so many fish since arriving. Even without fishing tools, he's confident they can catch plenty. Dank, however, spots a lot of animal droppings and prefers not to set up the shelter too close to the water. They need to stay alert for nearby animals. With some daylight left, they quickly start building the shelter. Fortunately, there are thorn bushes nearby for protection, which most animals will avoid unless provoked. Jeff feels pretty secure sleeping at night, but Dank isn't as optimistic. They need to find an escape route in case of an attack. Jeff suggests calling the crew to drive the animals away, which wouldn't cost much. Dank is very unhappy with this idea. They had conflicts when paired up in the last challenge, and he really doesn't want to stay with Jeff. He asks the crew when they can regroup, hoping Jeff will be eliminated. It's not the individual challenge phase yet, so team competitions are still on. Jeff knows he was too aggressive in the last challenge, which might have caused some hostility. This time, he plans to get along better with everyone. However, he won't hold back in the challenges. He actually likes Dank, who is just slightly less skilled and fit than him. If they could cooperate, Jeff believes no other group could beat them. They could make it to the top 3 and then see who lasts the longest. It's a great plan. We'll see how they perform later. Frando's group finally reaches their destination and is very satisfied. After a bit of tidying up, they can lie down and rest. Danny feels he's the weakest among the remaining contestants. Not eating meat to replenish energy is making him weaker, and he fears he might be eliminated in the next round. Frando really likes Gary, who performed well in the last challenge and was a great help to the team. To avoid nighttime animal attacks, they need to build a wall around the shelter to buy some reaction time. Frando believes learning from Gary in this challenge is valuable, even if he gets eliminated next time. Keith's group reaches their spot, featuring the largest tree with branches sturdy enough for Darling. Keith is pleased with his team, equipped with fishing tools and bows. Keith's wilderness knowledge and trick stamina make them strong, even as a temporary team. They quickly assign tasks, and Trick is happy with the group. If only one person could win the prize. He believes the group could last until the end. They quickly clear the shelter area. Keith starts a fire to prepare for grilling fish at night. There's a rich pond nearby, and with fishing tools in their group, they can eat fish every day. Just thinking about it makes him happy. It turns out that having fishing gear is better than bows. Keith thinks they can smoke some fish to preserve it, but Darling disagrees, not wanting to attract animals. He thinks it's safer to eat the fish right away. Someone might want to trade for their fishing gear. They'll have to think about that. After some hard work, they finally get to eat some meat. It's been a long time since they had such good meat, and it instantly revitalizes them. Even without any seasoning, the grilled meat tastes pretty good. Keith is increasingly satisfied with his team and wonders what the crew will come up with next. For now, he just wants to enjoy this feast. Based on past challenges, there will likely be new equipment to compete for. Trick thinks they can trade fishing gear with other groups. For now, it's best to use the axe to chop wood, provided they catch enough fish to have the energy for the next challenges. Who to trade with will be up to Keith and Darling. As night falls, rhinos start to roam. Jeff is happy with his new teammates, and they've already grilled and eaten fish. There's nothing better than eating meat after a long day. You can almost smell the delicious meat through the screen. It's a great start. Jeff is already looking forward to catching more fish tomorrow and hopes to get some fishing gear. Eating fish every day would be a dream. As they enjoyed their meal, they suddenly heard a rhino's breathing. They didn't expect this on the first night and feared the rhino might charge through the thorn bushes. Everyone held their breath, realizing the shelter's location wasn't ideal. Darling wasn't feeling well either. Despite winning first place in the afternoon challenge, he injured his groin and now feels constant pain, making it hard to sleep. He hopes to feel better by morning, otherwise, he'll have to call a doctor and might need surgery. On day 16 of the challenge, Darling's condition hasn't improved and is getting worse. If this continues, he might end up like Keith. His groin is swollen, and Keith can tell it's serious without even looking. He advises Darling to call a doctor immediately. Darling isn't sure how he got injured, but the area is very sensitive and hurts with any movement. He agrees to call for help, and the doctor arrives quickly to examine him. Parrick thinks no man would want to lose that part, even for $100,000. Maybe for double that amount, it could be considered. The doctor, after examining and touching the area, thinks the problem isn't too severe and should heal over time, but there's a risk of infection that could lead to removal. For now, anti-inflammatory medication is the only option. If the condition worsens, Darling might end up alone. He holds back tears as the examination is very painful. He hopes his groin will heal soon. However, the show won't wait for him to recover, and there's a new challenge to complete. The map marks new survival items. Fishing and hunting tools can also be obtained from the baobab tree. It's up to the 3 groups to decide. They can try to get everything if they have the ability. The 2 groups without fishing tools are eager to get them, making the competition intense. Jeff thinks they have a good chance since they're closest and confident in their abilities. He can't imagine anyone beating them. Although Keith's group already has 2 fishing tools, Trick wants one for himself. After a brief discussion, they decide to split up. Frando's group plans to get the fishing and hunting tools, while Danny wants to check out the baobab tree. Gary disagrees, thinking it's better to get tools for meat. The only issue is Danny doesn't eat meat. Gary argues that no one else will go to the baobab tree, and it's more important to get tools. Other groups also want to check out the baobab tree. Jeff thinks there will be plenty of resources there, and if everyone fights for tools, at least they can fill their stomachs with food. Danny decides to go to the baobab tree alone, allowing his group to focus on getting tools. The contestants have mostly made their plans, and now it's a matter of who gets the tools. Although the doctor advised Darling to rest, he wants to participate, so he endures the pain. Gary, Jeff, and Dank head for the fishing tools, while Keith's group goes for the survival tools. The remaining contestants go for the baobab tree fruit. Danny is very happy to see so many fruits on the ground. After filling his bag, he heads to meet Gary. Frando thinks the food is good enough to keep them from going hungry for a while. The fishing tools are hidden in a tree in the forest. Throwing the net into the water will guarantee a good catch. Finding it in the forest is not easy, as they could get pricked by thorns at any time. It tests the contestants' map reading skills. Jeff and Dank move quickly, as map reading is second nature to them. They guess the tools are hidden under a cliff. Danny and Frando are heading to the fishing tools but haven't seen any other contestants yet. The area is vast. Dank and Jeff aren't sure which tree to look in, so they keep moving and scanning the area. Frando spots Dank and, despite not having the map, uses his firefighting skills to estimate the location. With the map, they'd find the net faster. Dank's group gets lucky and finds the net in a tree. They hurry to retrieve it carefully, avoiding tears. Handling it is tough, with thorns pricking them. Fortunately, Dank brought animal hides to lie on. The only awkward part is Dank's but keeps bumping into Jeff's face. Dank kept getting pricked by the net, but he had brought animal skins to lie on while working. The only awkward part was Dank's but bumping into Jeff's face. If not for the net, Jeff would have thrown him off. Oddly, this made Jeff feel better, even though they only untangled half of it after a long day. They needed sticks to finish. Dank felt their relationship was getting awkward and smiled sheepishly. Jeff was already trying with the sticks, but Frando had seen Dank, and they had no chance of getting the net. They hurried to find survival tools. Danny and Gary had successfully met up and planned to check if the hunting tools were still there. They had to walk about 500 feet according to the map. Jeff and Dank had spent a lot of time but finally managed to untangle most of the net. They suggested the show crew place it better next time. Jeff didn't expect to work so smoothly with Dank. They felt like longtime partners and were definitely the best duo this season. Jeff was very satisfied with the net and wanted to throw it into the pond to catch fish right away. Dank thought they had cut enough. Jeff tried to climb down the tree with the net, and luckily Dank reacted quickly, or the net would have been damaged. It seemed it would take more time to untangle. While they were busy with the net, Gary and Danny were searching for hunting tools. Frando was competing with Keith's group for survival tools. They had just reached the baobab tree, but there weren't many fruits left, barely enough to fill a bag. Gary and Danny reached the cliff, which looked like leopard territory. They were afraid something might suddenly appear and suspected the show crew had hidden the tools in a cave. They didn't know what the tools looked like and could only search around. At crucial moments, they had to rely on Danny. They were at a high altitude and should search below. Gary regretted leading them the wrong way and thought Danny should have read the map from the start. They might have already gotten the tools and returned. Danny said it was fine, as long as they got the hunting tools, they could reorient themselves using the map. Darling's injury had slowed the team down. If they had known, they would have stayed in the shelter. Trick was anxious and moved ahead. He didn't want to end up with no tools. He was experienced in outdoor adventures and knew how to navigate the map's markers, so he sped up. Tracy watched Trick and wanted to follow him secretly. Trick found the tools, and everyone heard his shout. He wanted to keep them for himself, but the rock was too heavy to lift alone, so he called for his teammates. The wooden pole might help, but Darling's injury was slowing them down. Trick tried to lift the rock, but couldn't get the tools out and had to call for help, feeling very frustrated. Tracy saw Trick leave and thought it was a good opportunity to try lifting the rock alone. Whether he succeeded didn't matter, the point was to put pressure on them, making them use more energy. He wondered how his teammates were doing and decided to work harder to surprise them. Frando hadn't found any tools and was getting anxious. He thought he saw something in a cave under a large rock and crawled in to retrieve it. It turned out to be a hunting knife, which would make processing animals easier. After working so long, he could finally rest. Tracy was still trying to pry the rock. When Trick returned and saw Tracy trying, he got a bit excited. He had found the tools first, but now had to watch someone else try. He found a better wooden pole and didn't want it to break halfway, so he placed a large rock on top to hold it down. Tracy tried for a long time, but couldn't pry it open and had to let Trick's team continue. They quickly set up the area. The principle was simple: use ironwood as a lever, rocks as a fulcrum, and small stones underneath for support. This made prying easier, and they could retrieve the tools. It was similar to how they used to build boats, and their efficiency increased. After much effort, they finally saw the tools. Keith wanted to reach in and grab them but worried the pole might not hold, so they had to pry slowly. The rock had moved quite a bit. Everyone pushed together. After a long effort, they finally got the tools out. With the animal skin, they wouldn't worry about the cold at night. Keith's group had the most equipment and could return to the shelter to rest. Jeff's group had just gotten the branches down, and the net was still tangled in the thorns. They had to untangle it slowly. Jeff felt like he was being cut by knives. They had been working for 3 hours and were getting weaker. Tracy had returned by then. They finally got the net down and were ready to see how many fish they could catch. All the tools had been taken by the contestants. Jeff was excited. With the net, they could catch fish to feed everyone. Frando's group not only got 2 hunting knives, but also 2 bags of edible fruits. Keith's group tried using guts as bait to fish. The challenges were physically demanding, and they needed enough meat daily to avoid fainting. Keith was confident they could catch fish. Darling's injury wasn't improving, and he just wanted to rest. Trick thought Darling was crucial. Without him, they couldn't have moved the rock. He hoped things would improve, otherwise they would have to send Darling home. Darling's condition was bad. His injury was swollen and blackened. Everyone thought a doctor should check him. Keith didn't want Darling to quit, but didn't want to lose a teammate either. Darling felt uncomfortable and went to relax a bit. Dank's group had the net but found many holes that needed fixing. Tracy thought the show crew was too much. They could have placed it on another tree. They had to fix the net quickly to catch fish. Keith's group wasn't having much luck fishing. There were many fish, but they were hiding. Trick initially thought their fishing gear was good, but now they hadn't caught a single fish and felt very down. Jeff's group had fixed the net and tried fishing. It was Jeff's first time using such a net, and Tracy guided him. Jeff didn't want Tracy to use it, so he had no choice but to try himself. He threw it like casting a ballet. Jeff managed to throw it, but didn't catch any fish. He had participated in many challenges, but didn't expect to give up his bow for a net. After several tries, Jeff finally caught a fish, enough for a good meal.
This is what I live for! Beauty! Look at it! Look at that beauty! We got... Yes!
Gary's group heard Jeff shout. They could only eat some fruits to regain energy. Luckily, Danny insisted on getting them, or they would be hungry. The fruits restored some energy, but were too little for Frando. He was getting weaker and needed to catch fish. He regretted choosing a bow for hunting instead of a net. Seeing other groups catching fish made him more anxious. Keith's group wasn't doing well with fishing. He wanted to trade his fishhooks for 2 small knives, which would be more useful for future challenges. Frando was interested in the fishhooks but thought they weren't suitable here. He decided to discuss it with his teammates. Gary and Danny didn't agree with the trade, as the pond wasn't suitable for fishhooks, and Danny didn't eat meat. Fishhooks weren't as useful as hunting knives. Frando's desire to trade was dampened by his teammates' opinions. Thinking it over, it wasn't worth it. On the 18th day of the challenge, Gary wanted to see if there was anything edible nearby. Finding some honey would be great. He saw an eagle and heard a horn, so he went to check. He found a crocodile, which could feed them for a while if hunted. There were also big fish nearby, and Gary tried to catch one by hand. If he had a net, he could bring the fish back for a good meal. He considered sharing the news to get a piece of meat. Keith wanted to trade tools but hadn't received any offers. Darling felt much better and could work normally in a few days. Survival in the wild was uncertain, and it was unclear if Darling would fully recover. They hoped he would return to help soon. Gary brought back news of the pond and thought sharing it with other contestants would mean he wouldn't need fishing tools. He could get food from them. Everyone was there, so they discussed food distribution. Jeff knew Gary wasn't that kind-hearted, but food was too important. They agreed to check the pond. Trick didn't understand why Frando didn't trade for fishing tools. Danny had stopped the trade because he didn't eat fish and suggested Frando trade tools. Danny had gathered many fruits, but Trick wanted other food and took the chance to explore while others were away. He found a bird's nest and hoped to get some eggs. He worked hard and got many small eggs, which he hid to eat later. Gary led everyone to the pond, and they were pleased with the hunting spot. Contestants explored the area seriously, thinking they could catch many fish. Gary urged everyone to work quickly so he could have meat, acting like a salesman. He kept telling Jeff how great the place was and urged him to catch some fish. Dank and Tracy saw this and knew exactly what Gary was up to. Jeff and Gary were old teammates, and Gary loved to slack off, often trying to trick others into doing the work. Everyone was aware of this and just watched Gary perform. Jeff had no intention of moving. He was here to win the championship and would only work if his teammates joined in. Gary kept pitching his idea, but Dank's group ignored him. This made Gary very angry. He had shared the information, but no one took him seriously. Tracy found him extremely annoying and just wanted him to shut up. Dank thought Gary was a performer who got anxious when the audience didn't interact with him. Jeff thought the area was too windy, but there were so many fish that you could catch one with a casual throw. Dank's group finally gave a half-hearted acknowledgement, thanking Gary.
Catfish dinner!
Keith was quite envious of Jeff's catch and wondered how Trick was doing. It turned out that hooks weren't as effective as nets. It took him a long time to catch a fish. Fernando was also envious, wishing he had traded for a fishing hook. Now, he couldn't do anything. The large lake should attract animals, but there were no good ambush spots nearby. He couldn't shoot fish in the water, so he needed fishing tools. Trick was getting better at fishing and could now catch big fish. Gary thought the more they caught, the more meat he could mooch off them at night. Dank's group decided to give each of them a fish to shut Gary up. Jeff thought it was a great idea to take the net. The current catch was enough to last until the next challenge. Jeff didn't want to share fish with Gary, but it wasn't time to reveal his true intentions yet. When it came to individual competition, he wouldn't need to maintain a facade of peace. Gary was worried Jeff's group wouldn't share, so he directly asked for fish, getting more agitated by the minute. Dank's group had planned to give Gary a fish, but his rude behavior made them worry a fight might break out. Tracy thought Gary was being unreasonable. He had no sense of humility. If he had been a bit more polite, would they have refused to share food? Dank was also very angry. They had put in a lot of effort for the net, and although Gary provided useful information, they weren't there to work for free. If Gary didn't catch a fish today, the other contestants wouldn't have an easy time either. Trick caught a big fish for the first time, and if Fernando had agreed to trade, he could have caught it. Trick was right. Fernando shouldn't have listened to Danny. The knife was his, and after talking with Trick, Fernando was tempted. Trick thought Danny shouldn't stop his teammates from fishing just because he didn't eat meat. You couldn't fill your stomach with just vegetables. He believed Fernando would choose to trade. Dank's group had caught so many fish that they couldn't finish them all. Dank would rather give a fish to Fernando than share with Gary, who was the oldest contestant but acted like a child. Fernando was surprised to catch a fish and felt conflicted. Seeing others catch so much, he wanted fishing tools too. Darling was amazed by the size of Trick's catch, which was big enough to feed 3 people. Darling thought it would be beneficial for their health. Roasting the whole fish was slow, it would be better to cut it into fillets with a small knife. Gary didn't see any problem, they were still giving him a fish without him doing anything. A little friction was no big deal. Fernando thought if they had fishing tools, they wouldn't need to rely on others. He envied Dank's net, which was perfect for catching fish. He wanted to trade his small knife for a fishing hook to get food from the water. Danny had no interest in this. Gary thought it was useful, but felt trading 2 knives for a hook was a loss. Danny refused to trade the knife, fearing they wouldn't get it back. Fernando argued that a knife couldn't get them food. Gary didn't care much since he had an axe. Fernando had enough tools but was too concerned about his teammates' opinions. He needed to change his mindset. Dank's group was much happier, with more fish than they could eat. They built a tripod to roast all the fish. Dank had never caught so many fish at once and could now savor the taste. Although he didn't fully trust Jeff, their cooperation was going well, and they could get along for now. Jeff found it strange to work with Dank, but aimed to reach the top 3 together. Tracy was more clear-headed, knowing that once they left the camp, they were competitors. Everyone wanted the prize money. Keith's group had also roasted their fish. It tasted great. Trick thought Fernando would definitely want to trade. He couldn't wait for others to feed him. Darling suggested talking to Dank's group, who probably wouldn't share food with Gary's group. Trick agreed and shared this with Dank's group, who fell silent. Tracy already had issues with Danny, wondering why he stopped others from eating meat. Fernando was too kind. If it were her, she would have traded long ago. Kindness wasn't helpful here. It was the 20th day of the challenge. Jeff's group started fishing as soon as they woke up. Trick was also trying to fish, and everyone was working hard to improve. Trick was confident he could catch fish daily, while Gary's group was resting. Trick came over to show off, hoping to stir up conflict in Gary's group, making Fernando more eager to trade. Trick said everyone was fishing there, and Gary could join if he had tools. Gary was furious, feeling the pond was his discovery. But after others caught fish, they didn't share. Trick thought Gary was unreasonable. He had shared the spot, and they had given food yesterday. Did they have to share every catch? Gary felt they were being unfair. But Danny didn't want to trade the knife, thinking they could manage without it. Gary admired Danny for not eating meat despite the hunger and vowed to support him. Danny thought he was being discreet, but everyone knew he was behind the scenes. Gary confronted Jeff, asking why Keith was doing this. Gary already knew the answer, but wanted to hear it from Jeff. Jeff knew it was Danny's doing, but blamed Keith, making Gary angrier at Keith. Jeff said Keith was stealing his food, and Gary was now confused by Danny's manipulation. Jeff was waiting for Gary to mess up. That day, Gary confronted Keith, leading to a heated argument. Dank was very annoyed by the turn of events. As they argued, Danny ignored the noise, enjoying his food in the shelter. He planned to eat everything himself to have energy for the next challenges. What will happen next? Let's wait and see.